This one is a familiar one. Jeff Kipnis is a friend of the house. He teaches here on a regular basis. So I thought that there was something nice about there was an episode in Aaron Sorkin which it was called Ain't Nothing But a Family Thing, about the internal disputes within the family, in this case, the political power and how to operate. It's not easy to introduce Jeff for many reasons. He's not easy. The other one is I had to do it on a regular basis, so I'm running out of what to say and what to add. But I was thinking when Manfredo Tafuri died a bunch of years ago, just at Ketglas, which is one of my favorite writers, and he's a theorist and historian from Barcelona, not so well known in the American landscape because he's afraid of flying, so I think he never left Spain in his life. But he was a very interesting friend and colleague with Tafuri, and there was something really interesting about how he was trying to define the work of somebody like Tafuri, which in many ways, Ketglas defined him more as a political agitator figure than anything else, or somebody who, in a way, it completely shaped and reshaped the work of many other of his peers or historians and theorists and thinkers of architecture. So the work of Tafuri was not so much defined in Ketglas terms for what Tafuri did by himself, but also what the capacity of the work of Tafuri to affect and to change how the thing would operate. So there is a part in this text which I think is an interesting one where he compared the work of the understanding of the politics versus, he talked about the Viennese phenomenon, the preference that the great Viennese doctor had for analytical diagnosis rather than for therapeutics. And anybody, if you try to draw a parallel in which how Sayagh tried to operate, you will easily trying to understand that we are always much more for the therapeutic than for the analytical diagnosis. But the other thing that was interesting is that at the end, the conclusion that Ketglas comes is that Tafuri, therefore, is one of our own. And then he does this kind of a poetic thing about the idea of that Tafuri was something coming, something saying something, and at the end, he was like, anyone who ever heard It Forget That Voice? He's going to speak to us. Let's listen to him, he says. Now, I'm not so sure where the parallel in the relation with this in relation to Tafuri fit in relation to Jeff. But this idea of saying and talking, and I didn't want to be so solemn because Tafuri, for some weird reason, every time I mention Tafuri, I feel like there is a heaviness of seriousness that comes into my body, which always scares the shit out of me. And I never know why, but that's what equated probably my own education in Argentina and the weight of Tafuri at the time. So as an attempt to try to introduce what is the experience to work or listen or interact with Jeff, I thought that this would be a very, very good way to what I think we are for it today.
Malkovich. Malkovich, Malkovich. Malkovich, Malkovich. Malkovich, Malkovich. Malkovich. Malkovich, Malkovich. Malkovich. Malkovich! Malkovich.
Anyway, you can replace the word Malkovich for the word Kipnis and can give you a good sense of what it is. But nevertheless, I want to paraphrase Ketglas here and talk about like Jeff, therefore, is one of us. And when I mean one of us, I'm talking really specifically about the group of people that we try to operate and see the world in a particular way. So he's going to speak to us, sort of. He's going to produce us, sort of. He's going to provoke us. Can anyone who ever heard him forget him? Architecture is nothing but a cultural construction. He's going to speak to us until we rise. He says, Kipnis, Kipnis, Kipnis. Jeff Kipnis.
57 minutes from now, no matter where I am and what I'm saying, this lecture will be over. I haven't given a public lecture in a year. I haven't been on a plane in a year. I have no idea if I have 15 minutes of material, or, which is probably unlikely, or 3 hours of material, which you won't hear. I'm a little bit nervous. So let's see how it goes. Okay. Uh-oh. Okay, so let's try that again. Let's get rid of this one. Let's get rid of this one. I'm okay. I'm okay. Go away. Just go away. Honey, go away. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Anyway, the title of this lecture is Why Bother? Director's Cut, Part 1 in Praise of the Project. Now, I've been planning this lecture a long time, you can tell. It was supposed to be that list of all the other lectures, and she was going to come over and help fix it, and that's okay. I'm a professional, so what you don't know is supposed to be there, that's okay. So, because I was going to kind of go up from the bottom, and everybody's looking at you, and all of a sudden I'm looking back on everybody, because I wanted to look back on the entire year. Oh, isn't this just like things go? And so a year ago, Hernan said, will you come back next year? And I said, no, I won't come back next year, but I would like to do the very last lecture. Turns out the next to the last lecture, but I'd like to do the very last lecture of the year. And what I had planned to do is watch all the lectures of the year, see if I understood where the school was going, look back on it. I knew I was going to do it, so I had this photograph taken, and I put that in. I thought, wow, that's pretty good, think that far ahead. And there I am looking back on all the lectures. And all those other lectures, they're looking at you, this kind of thing. Yeah. And that is a cheap trick, and I'm going to teach you why that's such a cheap trick and why don't pay any attention to it. So I got through the first gimmick 1 done. And a lot of it, now this was an alternative, I said, you can use this as well. You can use this as, if you don't like the back of my head, but I prefer the back of my head. And this is a painting by Bacon. Bacon's going to show up a lot in this lecture. It also looks a lot like me, actually. Well, it's pretty damn good, I think. So that was the alternative. So Stephanie picked the head, and I appreciate that. So now, what do I mean by why bother? Why bother to study architecture? What do you think we can do? What good can we do? What's the point of it? It's not that hard to build. It's not that hard to... It's actually not that hard to learn to do it and do it pretty well. And these days, it's not that hard to learn to do it pretty, I don't know, funky. You can do funky architecture. Have you seen this thing, this advertisement out that says, I don't know, something about funky chicken? Make sure you don't let the salmonella get on your funky chicken. Have you seen this ad? It's this fantastic ad where they've got funky salmonella on their chicken. And if I was a kid, I would love the funky salmonella on my or I'd like the salmonella making my chicken funky. But you watch it. So I thought to myself, okay, I really need to explain to them why bother. Why do I bother? Why do you bother to come to SciArc? What is it about coming to SciArc? You know, why would you come here? Why not come to this expensive place? It's a weird place. You're pretty much certain not to easily get a job immediately on the basis of your portfolio. So, and then I thought to myself, you know, what's the point of my coming back? Why should I bother to come back? And actually what I thought to myself is I need to find that out for myself. Now last summer, I had a weird summer. I kind of went crazy. I wrote this gigantic text about Eric Moss, which you'll all be able to read this month. I went back into religion, started studying music again. I really tried to figure out if I had anything left to offer, because I didn't want to come back out here unless I thought I could give you something. And I didn't want to come back, I didn't really want to teach anywhere unless I thought I had something to teach. And so I really gave it some thought and went crazy. So I expected that I really kind of realized that I think we have two things in common. And I think what you and I have in common is a sense of personal calling. I'm going to read my text. I don't do this very often. In fact, I'm going to set it up here. Never read. Though we mostly don't like to admit it, because we each feel we're something special, and not just special, like everyone is special. Like everyone is a star of their own life, but we feel especially special, which is kind of a weird thing. Most of us, I expect, have had moments of epic or even transcendent perspective where we abruptly leave the here and now and see, or more exactly feel precisely a different sensation of the world, filled with insights and answers, and a confidence in our own abilities to act upon them in a way that will truly matter. And most of all, most of us as well have been diagnosed and treated for these problems. And it doesn't matter any more than it matters, in my opinion, if our ecstasies are substance related, to be honest, as long as we are careful not to hurt ourselves or others. What matters, and the only thing that matters, is that we are driven to understand them not just in their own essence, but in their relationship to a host of previous and current actions of others in architecture, and this mold them into finer and more brilliant and more powerful and more relevant and thus worthier actions of architecture. And that's why I think we came to SciArc. Now, though that may be how we came, that's not why we came, because first we came, and I include myself with your teachers and students alike, because we thought that there was magical secrets being taught here, technique or knowledge or something. And that's not true, but in fact it's correct. This is no hog patch or whatever that place Harry Potter goes to. But the magic secrets that are taught here are the secrets that only can occur in an intense discursive community among like-minded, passionate colleagues. And SciArc is as effective as any in the world at producing that, and it's an addictive thing. And what happens is you learn from being in such a discursive community what it means to produce hysteria, a kind of hysteria, and a kind of passion for the backstory. And you can only learn that, or it used to be that you could only learn that in proximate relationships, being with people in these kinds of intense situations. And the problem, of course, is that increasingly you have to do these in remote communities. And so you come to SciArc and you learn it, and now we have to figure out how to extend those into remote communities, because most of your colleagues and the colleagues that you're going to want to carry this out when you leave here are going to be not people that you're in relationship in a proximate community or a community like Neimark. And they're not just going to be the people you've met, but they're people that are working on the problems that you're going to want to work on in a hysterical way, in a passionate way. And you're going to want to be able to enter into those kinds of relationships on the internet primarily. And it is possible. I mean, people do it all the time. Architects are really having a difficult time doing it. And so I want to discuss that a little bit. And so the two themes that I really want to discuss are hysteria and backstories. Now, earlier in the day, Stephanie said, you must really be excited to come back to Neimark. And I answered to her, no. Not because I was hoping I'd be excited. I wanted to be excited. And the fact of the matter is, I'm not excited, but not because I'm bored, but because I'm feeling old. When I was young, I had the, I don't know what I would say, I had the passion to fight and to win. But with age, I've lost the desire and the energy. And I really don't know what to do about it. And this is the truth. And so, and I'll tell you something else that not many people know. A year ago, I left here, and I left 7 friends of mine, Tom and Jenny and Dwayne, waiting for texts that I had agreed to write about them. And I got lost on this journey, and I never contacted them again. And I'm sure they felt abandoned and really terrible about it. And I feel incredibly guilty about it. And so I haven't told anybody about this. Nobody knows about this. I haven't discussed it with anybody. And so I really didn't want to come back about here. But miracles happen. Things come across, and really fantastic things happen to me. And one of the things that happened to me was this last week, just last week, when I was watching the Vikings. Any of you guys watch the Vikings? Fantastic TV show.
They'll be wondering where you are.
I doubt it.
What are you thinking about?
Paris.
You must be excited to be going back.
No. I feel so old. When I was young, I had the passion to win, but now, with age and all that comes with it, I have lost the desire and the strength.
A few years ago, I established a settlement in a distant country where I took many of my people and friends to make a new life for themselves. But shortly after my departure, they were all slaughtered, their homes destroyed and burned. I live with such guilt because of it. And nobody knows.
My father's the emperor.
say he left Kata boy. He came back a man. Kill a bear with his bare hands.
With his own hands.
By the way,
That's what the backstory's like. But you get that courage, you get that moment when you find out her father's the emperor. And then you get up there, and then your asshole enemy shows up, and it just goes right away. So, a little bit about me, just in case. I'm trying to get ready for my engagement with Graham. I am a vitalist matter theorist. I come from physics, for those of you that don't know me. I'm trying to tell you some serious stuff. This is a brief introduction to matter theory. I'm trying to give you a reason, give you the why bother. And what I believe is, from its inception, as it says, all existence is matter as process. And I don't mean by matter material, I mean matter as process, which basically means that matter is a process of sending, receiving, and reorganizing as such. And what is sent are signals, not signs, signals. Now that's an important thing to understand. There's a big difference between a signal and a sign. And signals are promiscuous. A good way to think about this is, imagine a bird, a little chick in a tree, asking for food from her mother, a mother. Making a sound. Now, this is an incredible thing to think about, because if you're an ornithologist, you know, for example, that in 2 million mating birds on a beach, I forgot the species, when the parents go out to feed, to get food for the birds, the only way they recognize their chick is by the sound. So they'll come back and there'll be 1 million chicks and 1 million parents, and they find their chick precisely by recognizing the sign of the chick. That's a sign. But that sound is doing a lot more stuff. For example, if you're a hawk, that sign is now a signal, and the hawk hears something else. If you're an ornithologist, it hears something else. If you happen to be on a snowbank, and it's an avalanche, I mean, there's a snow at the poise of an avalanche, the avalanche could be launched into an avalanche. So many, many, many things are receiving that signal. And so that creates a gigantic network of interactions so promiscuous that it cannot be contained in a theory of signification. And this was a Deleuzian idea about the robustness of the signal over the sign, and it has shaped my thinking ever since I encountered it, and it's why I left the work of Derrida for Deleuze. And then why I tell you this last thing, I mean, this is a very quick introduction, is that this idea of sending, receiving, and reorganizing is the essence of contemporary particle theory and physics today. So all those things up there, leptons, bosons, that's what they do. They send, they receive, they reorganize. What's left out of that is something Whitehead discussed in his philosophy, and that is, what is the inner life of an electron when it receives a photon? So we know all of the behaviors, that's what physics tells us, but we don't know what it feels like for an electron to get to be in that relationship, and that is a sensation. Now, physics understands it doesn't do this, but that is an important omission, and that is the essence of what we're going to be talking about, the problem of sensation. So a good physicist, and you can find them online, will tell you that the reason a proton and an electron stay together to be a hydrogen atom is not because they can do physics. It's not because a proton and an electron are able to do quantum mechanics. That's a silly idea. You have about 300 trillion of them in you, and none of you can do quantum mechanics. So they stay together for one reason and only one reason: they like it. They like the way it feels. They like the sensation. And in fact, there's a really good guy online who says they love it. Now, there's an interesting side note for those of you. Just a few weeks ago, this was another little lucky thing for me, like the Vikings. They just happened to confirm that the direct detection of gravity waves. I think this is really great, which confirms the inflation theory. I don't know if any of you follow this, but it also means that the mathematics are virtually irrefutable that we live in a world in a universe of multiverses. I don't know if any of y'all are interested in that, but that's a really fantastic idea, that there's not just one universe, that there are pockets and pockets and pockets of innumerable numbers of universes. Kind of a neat thing. Now, we also need to figure out why bother. We need some value structures. And so I've given you what I think of the three great value structures. The first is the greatest good for the largest number. This is by Bentham, which you know from the Panopticon, not an architect, and hence the Panopticon is not an architectural project. That's a failed idea as a general value structure, but a very important idea for certain practices like science and engineering to do the greatest good. It's a disaster in the arts and was a disaster for architecture. It is the disaster of modernism. The second one is the greatest diversity with the most coherence. That tends to be the best one we've been practicing in architecture for the last 40 years. How do we achieve the greatest diversity with the most coherence is basically what we've been discussing since after World War II. And the last one we're kind of interested to, and that's the absolute value of origination and the promiscuity and the promiscuous processes of re-origination. So this is art for art's sake, or just the value of, now when it says absolute value, I mean that mathematically. Good or bad. That's why Nietzsche said beyond good and evil. That means there is no way to judge or assess an original or originating production. So these are the three kinds of values. They are incompatible. You cannot create an economy, a robust ecology of productive practices without all three of them, particularly cultural practices, but it turns out to be true for all matter practices. So the latter two are the two that we work on the most. Sci-art leans a little bit more to the last, to the bottom. And then finally, by the way, I just thought ars gratia artis means art for art's sake. That's why MGM is listed right there. Jaspers is not Greg and Sylvia's son. Just another guy named Carl. And that's bad Latin. I think it should say, if I remember correctly, ars artis gratia. But little did they know. Here's an example I thought you would be very interested in. This was the mathematical, this was the rational calculation of the effect of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs by Western American, particularly mathematicians, who went in, did censuses, and here's how they analyzed the population, the effect of the bombs. So they went in, and so as you can see, those were the 1945 and 1944 populations. They divided male and female, and then ages, and then distance from the bomb, and they produced these graphs. And these results were so appalling to the Japanese mathematicians as being so irrelevant to a discussion of the reality, an objective discussion to the realities of the effect of the bombs, that they, after 7 years of political fighting, were entitled to conduct a census, another census, and do another evaluation. And here's the results that they produced. So instead of these categories, which makes perfectly good sense to this, here are the objective production of the census and the results of the bomb that they produced, in which they divided the population into households, heads, spouses, parents, grandparents, eldest sons, all other sons, eldest daughters, so those are the categories that they produced as an objective, rational effect of the bombs. So this is the debate about what actually is the value that should be used. I think it's really an interesting discussion. Now, finally, I want to discuss modes of analysis and interpretation that we should be thinking about when we analyze works of architecture. And I'm only interested in analyzing works of architecture for the benefit of enabling architects to produce new works, not for the benefit of whatever it would be the benefit for a larger cultural understanding. My only interest is to engage in this thing I discussed earlier, and that is this kind of close conversation among like-minded people that are trying to produce work. And so the first is the autobiography, which is the pearl of, my example is the pearl is the autobiography of the oyster. This is a beautiful thought. So you think about a pearl, it's perfectly beautiful. It has to leave its context entirely. It is the gigantic, most incredible lie that was ever told about an oyster. It has to leave the oyster, leave the water, get on Audrey Hepburn's neck, be admired as one of the most beautiful things. No one knows it's the corn pad of an oyster. And this is what all autobiographies are. But that's one way to think about it. Listen to what the architect says. Listen to what the artist says. It always comes out like that. So, but we should do that. The second one, I think this is the most important. That's why I got a big dot. And that's biography and the synchronic archive. That means if you really want to understand a work, you really have to understand the context it was made, the life of the person who made it, all the forces that were surrounding it. This is what a good historian does, or a good critical historian does. And its motto is, you can't make it up, as by Sylvia. That's what she says all the time. You know, and I think she's right. Thank God there are people that can't make it up, won't make it up, really do their homework, go out and try to figure out what was intended, meant, indicated in all the signals and all the signs. That's the good one. I don't do that. I like the one that says, no one knows, anything goes. And my answer to Sylvia is, you can too. Which is what I do. So. But I have an aversion to the rigor of language. I don't like people that have a word, want to be careful about it, stick to it, use what it means, and I've had it for a very long time. I'm a writer. I know the power of words. I love them. They are the most important and impressive magic trick you can use. And I love to use them, but I don't like to obey them. Now, when I was 4, this is a picture of me, believe it or not. When I was 4, I was sent to a special school. I thought it was a special school for really bright people at Hunter College. Turns out it was a special school for behavioral problems. But I was told my whole life it was a school for gifted children. And there I am asking if I can read the Ring of the Nebula. My mom took this picture. And this is one of the tests that I had to take. And what I had to do is interpret Vitkover's meaning of whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must always be silent. This is a test for a 4-year-old. And so I put, huh? And then the teacher wrote, just relax, Jeff, and try again. And then I put, numbers do not talk. Which I thought was I can remember. It was a fantastic answer. Yeah, that's exactly what that means. And she said, remember, 1 is not a number, and it really pissed me off, whatever she said. So she told me, then I wrote, make me. I was talking to her, like, don't press down on a pencil, and make me. I got really mad. And then finally I answered the question, nuh-uh. One must be silent, and I put, So at a very early age, I was resisting the rigors of teaching, and I found this. It was a really hard thing to find.
Completely.
What is it? You look so worried.
Sonia, are you scared of dying?
Scared is the wrong word. I'm frightened of it.
It's an interesting distinction.
So these are the moments I remember my whole life, and that, of course, is an important part of my backstory. If you remember big scenes from movies, like I must have seen a million movies, but these are the key moments.
Max said to quote you directly. You can say whatever you want.
Just say we were involved.
That's true, isn't it?
No. But it's accurate.
See, I learned these tricks. I mean, these things have been in my mind forever. Now here are two of the most insidious, evil tricks of words in all of architecture. Theories and history of architecture. What's the trick there? Should be really obvious. History is singular, theories is plural. The book it's over before you get started. Yeah, there's no argument to be made. There's no discussion to be made. There's one thing that you can rely on. There's one thing that stands stalwart against all the vagaries of all the intellect and and it's history. And then there's a bunch of theories, you know. And even worse, there's literal transparency, literal and phenomenal. I guess I left the L off. But of course, that argument's over too. Which is better, literal and phenomenal? Phenomenal is a cooler word. The title means nothing. If you think about it, literal is less phenomenal than phenomenal. I mean, the whole thing, these are just gimmicks of writers. So I wasn't going to do that. So I got it, yeah, so all I'm saying is, so I'm just going to quickly show you some of the kind of stuff I do. I hate this painting. Hate it. Now, some of the stuff I've repeated before, it is, everybody agrees, the world's greatest Velázquez. It may be, it may not be, I don't really give a damn. It's just a stupid trick for kids, if you ask me. But I love Velázquez. Here are my favorite Velázquez's. These are they're called the Buffoons, you know. I love these paintings, and he was mean-spirited, so I know he was intending them to paint them, because I've read his biography, to belittle him. He put him in the corner. This is one of the very first paintings ever painted in a corner. This is Pablo de Valladolid. This is how I always imagine myself in public. I really think, I'm pretty sure I like to think I look like this. I'm pretty sure I look like this. You can look at that and you can see a history of space from the Renaissance or before to 19th century to the 20th century in those paintings. Total ridiculous interpretation, but it's right there. The maceration of those paintings, well, I won't get into this. More important to me, though, is this thing right here. Most of you have heard this, but this is called Pentimenti. This is caused by the oil. He made a correction. He overpainted this. The oil painting of the oil painting over about 25 years becomes transparent, so you can see the original. And so this is a Rauschenberg. Rauschenberg had no interest in Velázquez. But all the doublings in this painting, so this is the same helicopter, and there's a gigantic numbers of doublings that I'm not going to go into this painting. This is my favorite painting of the 20th century. But I'm convinced that he became fascinated by doublings through his interest in, this is Rubens, in Pentimenti. Maybe, maybe not. I doubt it would hold up to any scholarship. But one thing I know for sure, I mean, this is the Rubens. But Velázquez was one of the worst painters in the sense that he had terrible habits. So instead of cleaning his brushes like a good painter would do away from the canvas, he would clean his brushes on the canvas like that. Because he didn't care. 25 years he was going to be dead, he was going to get paid. He didn't give a damn that the Pentimenti would show up. So all these Pentimenti came back. Bacon was not particularly interested in Velázquez. He never talks about him as his master or copying, but he does all these homages to Velázquez, and every one of them has all of these marks that no one's ever explained. They're clearly, to me, the Pentimenti marks. Now, this is total BS, but it's what I do. And I think you'll have a hard time getting it out of your head. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about another. We're going to follow Bacon for a little bit, and we're going to follow some of these ideas about sensation. So, I was watching TV, probably drunk or stoned, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. I was watching a show called Slings and Arrows. Slings and Arrows was a show from Canada about a company. It's a little bit like Mozart in the Jungle. And so in this show, it's a Canadian, fictional Canadian Shakespearean company. A guy goes crazy, Jeffrey Tennant. He's a great Shakespearean actor, but he goes crazy. He's put in an institution. He comes back, and they make him the director of this company. And so the 3 seasons, they each mount a play, and it's all about the internal life. And the first season, they decide to do Hamlet. Now, I'm a fan of Shakespeare. I study Shakespeare quite a bit. I love it. I read a lot about it. And so I was really enjoying this, and I'm watching this show, and this is the 5th episode of it, and I totally love this. And then this scene happens.
Are we back, Jeffrey?
Jack, 3-1.
Okay, Act 3, Scene 1, Claudius and Polonius.
No, just Jack. We're gonna run the soliloquy.
Okay.
This one scares you, yeah?
Yeah, it scares the shit out of me.
All right, I know it.
Yeah, of course I know it. Everybody knows it. That's the problem.
Why?
Because when I say to be or not to be, the audience will be hearing every great actor who ever spoke those words. They'll hear Olivier and Burton or you.
More likely Mel Gibson, but...
When I say those lines, they won't be in the play anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They'll just be watching some guy acting.
Yeah.
Me specifically.
This is a problem.
Yeah, that's a fucking problem.
Because you'd just be a guy acting, and Hamlet isn't.
No. Well, yeah, he is kind of in a way.
Okay. So Hamlet is just acting? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, I mean, he acts like he's crazy, that antic disposition. But then, no, not really.
All right. You have got to be specific. In this scene, Act 3, Scene 1, does Hamlet know that Claudius and Polonius are spying on him?
I don't know.
You have to know. If Hamlet is aware of their presence and when you speak these particularly famous words, you're performing for the guy who killed your father and for a meddling old fool, both of whom are hidden in this room. And if you don't know they're here, then your audience is you. And those people in the seats. But you have to decide.
Now?
Now, I'm telling you, I'm thinking, what the hell? I have never in my life heard that there were these 2 options. Either he's being overheard, or it's the soliloquy we know. He's talking to himself. To be or not to be is a kind of introspection, perhaps even suicidal introspection, certainly psychological introspection. In my life, I never heard that Polonius and Claudius are on stage. And have you ever heard this? So I go back and I read the text. Sure enough, that's correct. And then I decide, I'm watching this, and that happens, and I'm just bang. And I start going back as it's recorded. Beverly gets crazy. She leaves the room. Different story. But I'm telling you, I become obsessed with this. I've never heard this. So I start studying Shakespeare and the history of the soliloquies. I start communicating with James Hirsch. it becomes I become obsessed with this. In James Hirsch's discussion, he identifies a key moment in which Laurence Oliviers invents the soliloquy because he argues it's a false soliloquy. The two characters on stage are on stage. They are meant to be, Hamlet is meant to be overheard. It is not a soliloquy, it's a part of a plot. Hamlet does not delay. There is no Freudian delay. That whole interpretation that we grew up with, that we know, is an invention of Laurence Olivier primarily to get out from under the tutelage of his master, John Gielgud. And so he makes a movie, and this is the movie.
To be? That is the question.
The incredible thing is he not only goes in the head, you see the brain. I don't know if you noticed that, but the ocean turns into the brain. And Hirsch, so this is an entire set of footnotes that I'm writing about this in an article I do on Eisenman. And by the way, it leads me to discover that Rembrandt's self-portraits, as you can see, are not self-portraits either. Because Hamlet is written in exactly the same year as some of the key Rembrandt self-portraits. So you'll see the multiple functions are, anyway. The use of the term self-portrait does not occur until the 19th century. And so this whole thing is an incredible discovery for me. And so the head was, it's not just about that, still more to come about the head. So now I'm turning to Francis Bacon. I'm thinking, okay, so next step is this, head. Remember Bacon? So I'm thinking, now I got that in the background. I'm reading this much later on. I still got all that in my background. This is my backstory. This is like backstory of my work. So when he's discussing this meat, body, spirit, you'll see that the body is not the face. It does not even have a face, but it does have a head, and the entire body can even be reduced to the head. And it's not the head that lacks spirit, but it's the spirit in bodily form. The head is the spirit in bodily form, a corporeal and vital breath, and an animal spirit. So this idea that Deleuze is going to advance from Bacon is an idea about heads, animal spirits, and painting. Becomes very important, just to remind you that it's about the head and Bacon. And just also to remind you, it's about sensations. What we're about to discuss now is sensations. So as he goes on in the area of hysteria, remember I said earlier on we're going to discuss hysteria and backstories. So he's now going to challenge the idea of phenomenology as not being adequate because it only invokes the lived body. But then he talks about beyond the organism is a kind of body that Artaud discovered, and it's called the body without organs. Some of you know it. It's an intensive body, and it's traversed by waves. And I'll let you read this, but the variations, thus the body does not have organs, but thresholds or levels. Sensation is not qualitative and qualified, but has only an intensive reality which no longer determines with itself representative elements, but allotropic variations. Sensation is vibration. Now, we know that the egg reveals just the state of the body before organic representation. And that's what he's saying is, before the egg starts to form organs, it's already having these pulses go all the way through it as sensations, as its means of forming the organs. So the body without organs is already in place, and the sensational system is already in place as it pulses through these. So he's mixing these wonderful metaphors of the body without organs and the body.
It's hard to watch. DNR. Her heart stopped beating.
She's still breathing. The breathing lens.
No pulse, no blood pressure.
But still breathing. Her spirit is hovering. It's half dead, half alive. She doesn't know if she wants to go. Ruth? You're deciding, aren't you, whether to go or stay, whether it's worth it? Ruth? She's decided this one's coming back.
Dr. James, we can't do any extraordinary intervention.
Why not? Work her legs, get the IV going again, get a warm blanket. We're gonna bring you back, Ruth. Is that all right with you?
It's okay.
You're back with us.
Her heart's beating.
Keep the blood moving.
What are you doing?
Rubbing her ears down. It feels nice. We've got you, Ruth. Yes.
There's a dark and a troubled side of life. There's a bright and a sunny side too. Though we meet with the darkness and strive, the sunny side we also may view. Keep on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. Keep on the sunny side of life.
So anyway, I don't know if it's the same for you, but for me, that is the living incarnation of Deleuze's thought on sensation and the body without organs and the spirit and the animal spirit. And I'm watching Getting On, and this for me, I can't believe it. And at this point, it should be obvious to you that what I'm amazed, my own personal project for architecture is and has always been the degree to which it can become the device, like art is more than any other practice, of enfranchising difference without rostering it. What is its ability to create the greatest diversity with the most unity? And so that has always been my interest. Despite my interest in all the other practices, in many ways I've thought about this, and I'm thinking to myself, how did they write this scene? These are characters. Somebody wrote those. This is an art practice. They didn't know science, know Deleuze. What enabled them, the writers of Getting On? Now, what's great, and so I'll go on, and he goes on and on about this, and this is the most interesting thing. This is where he puts forward his theory of disciplinary specificity. And so he starts to talk about a body with indeterminate organ. That is this is where he leaves the known and goes into the unknown. This is where he becomes hysterical in his writing. So the hysteric, which is us, is at the same time someone who imposes his or her presence, but also someone for whom things and beings are present, and like us, and who attributes to everything and communicates to every being their excessive presence. Certainly that's true for me. So painting gives us eyes all over, in the ear, in the stomach, temporarily. So you see a painting, and all of a sudden, in your organic body, the painting creates an indeterminate organ for your body without organs and makes sensations all the way through it. Then he starts to ask, why couldn't music do that? By putting an ear all the way through. And then he goes on, why not poetry or theory? And then with this thought, he outlines a comprehensive theory of sensations as a basis for sensational hysteria, as a basis for disciplinary specificity. So this is my approach to the problem. And then I asked myself, but what about architecture? What is its hysterical organ? Is it the body? Is it the civitas, or the contemporary collective of benign urban and post-urban estrangement, and these days aggravated urban and post-urban estrangement? Because we walk down the street now and don't have that sense of at least we can trust who we pass. And so is that an entire body that gets inscribed through architecture? And that's how I'm thinking. And more importantly than that, all those other art practices, they begin and end. So they have a kind of durational, provisionality. Every one of those others, but we, even though it's not quite true, architecture and the city doesn't, or it seems not to. So those are the kinds of questions I'm sort of interested in. And so now I think about some of the great backstories. This is, I think, a kind of nice head. In 1989, this was the first of 3 fantastic projects by Rem Koolhaas. I wanted to show you what I think are some of the great backstories constructed by architects. I'm going to do it very quickly. I'm going to do one. I'm going to skip 2. This is probably, I teach this all the time. A lot of people think this was Rem's head. You can decide for yourself. This is the Bibliothèque Nationale. The story for me is so fantastic because he told me this at a breakfast table. We lived 2 blocks from each other. He told me this story. It's clearly in the evidence I'm about to tell you, and yet he denies it. He never publishes it. He told me the backstory to this project and his thinking, which was it was supposed to be about moving through the subways of Paris, no longer about walking down the boulevards, but about moving through the subways of Paris as the way you got to here, about getting off at a subway station, about going to these objects as the elevators or subways, each of these objects is subways, and then he tilts this one object for one of the great backstories of a project. A project is not an unbuilt building. A project is a building, is a way of working in architecture, so it sets into motion this community of like-minded hysteria among a very small-minded people with a shared project. So this is the figure ground. I know you know the project, so it's the figure ground, solid void relationship of the, these are the voids, and what's a void there are all the books. Then there's this fantastic tilt. Everybody has to see this tilt. It's in the project. Ow, I just burned my hand. There it is again. Why is everything else in the body logic of this building, these plans, everything about this project is work specifically to be a project, not an unbuilt building, but to talk about architecture with colleagues at the level of a hysterical project. This is the backstory incarnate in architecture. And look, it's in a subway tunnel. Never mentions it, never discusses it. And as you know, and I've done this many times, another subway tunnel. It's in the book. He never says a word about it. And then he does these fantastic things. He draws the plan so it makes a little. And then he puts Cindy Sherman there. That's a whole other story. I have 2 choices. I've been really working on this Guggenheim thing. Y'all know this every noise at once thing? I've showed you this a million times. This is this website. Y'all know all this, so I will skip all this because I would like to show you a quick. You know what I'm talking about? Okay. Raise your hand if you don't know it. You shits. This is the algorithmic map of all of the of pop music. Okay, so y'all seen this? So what this is all of the world of pop music turned into an algorithmic map, and so you can see all the relationships between all of the, there it is. It's incredible. And then this is how they did it. It's one of the most amazing things I've ever done, and I always wanted to do this for architecture, and I've been working on this ever since to do for architecture. And I decided to use this as my tool for doing it. This is the nightmare of the Guggenheim competition that nobody wanted to pay any attention to. Nobody went to see it. Nobody went to visit it. Nobody knew how to parse it. There's 1,700 entries. So for the last 2 years, I've been trying to figure out how to do it because my intuition was inside of that was the same kind of map. So I spent a lot of time on this. And so I figured out this trick, and that was I took one of the ones and I put it into Google search. After a year and a half, I put it in the Google image search, and lo and behold, it by itself started to produce these families of similar projects. This happened about 3 months ago. It's amazing. Then I started to email the people who did those projects. And I said, did you know these projects? And it says, we were surprised and we didn't know any of the other people and we would love to meet them and have a discussion with them. These are two of the emails I got back. So confirming my fact they didn't know even that they were in the competition, they'd never met the people, and they wanted to share some interest with them. One of them says something interesting, and that is, it seems like it's mostly just, it's based on just the image, but not the concept, which I think is a very smart thing. On the other hand, these two are conceptually different projects, but you have to start with the similarity of the interest for the conceptual difference to matter. And so I got really excited about this. And then just last week, I swear to God, just last week, oh, it's gone. Wait a minute. Oh, shit. The Guggenheim produced, oh, I've lost the link. Wait a minute. Oh, no, here it is. The Guggenheim produced this. I had no idea they were doing this work. Oh, sorry. End of lecture. No more lecture for you? So what they did, oh, here it comes. You're not going to believe this. They hired 3 really expensive people and a really bad website designer. And here it is. Is that great or what? Okay, and they started to produce these maps of all the relationships. Now, it's not as good as the other map, but and I've contacted these people, and I put them in touch with the other stuff, and now we're all working together, and I don't know. So that's what I'm doing now. And I had a little dessert. I can skip all the other dessert. The other dessert was a few projects I was sort of interested in. I would like to just skip quickly. This is this is Florian Eisen, I don't know if you know him, from Soil. I'm now interested in these obsessed projects. This is the Liam Young of people going crazy to build. So he wanted to build this project. I don't know what this stuff is. So he wanted to build a butcher's mail. He needed a butcher's mail, but all the butcher's mail performance that people have tried in the world won't do what everybody hopes it does. This is butcher's mail. So he, let's see if I can find it. Oh, to make a long story short, he found out this company in China makes butcher's mail. And like Liam Young, he took his whole team to China. and he had them custom make perfectly all the butcher's mail. He married, actually, a woman from this small town in China that he found on Alibaba. And the entire town worked for him, just like Li Young, in order to make all this butcher's mail. I don't know why this film is so interesting, but he loves it. This is them all making each, there's, and here's so this obsession, and anyway, so that's part of that. But the last thing I'm like, only because I won't show you, this is another guy, small people I made. This is just the amazing story of the PS1 entry by Anna Neimark. Now, I'm done. Y'all should leave. But this is just hysterical, obscene, psyarch sanity, thought as reasonable, to such a level that you have to know it. So you can just have her tell it to you. But she and her colleague, I forgot his name, Andrew something, he apparently had nothing to do with this, as far as I can tell. It has a neat ending. It does relate to the talk. They decide for PS1, they're going to study dolmens, because these clearly make the perfect party space. And they get all these pictures of dolmens and study dolmens around the world. And they think, God almighty, as soon as this hits New York and PS1, we are going to win. And they do these fantastic dolmen studies. I'm going to make it short. So they work on dolmens, beautiful, just fantastic work. And I think to myself, if you're going to work in boxes, why not just do hinges? If you're going to end up, all the dolmens got curves and all that sort of stuff, why not work in hinges? That seemed to make more sense. And it turns out hinges were party spaces. Famously party spaces. It just was discovered more famously a party space than we know. They partied all over town. This thing was unknown. This is the party path. So they would start here and they dance down this 300 path. And this is a true party space. No dolmens. So she shows this map of all the dolmens around the world. I don't pay much attention to it. She goes on, more dolmens, and you see it, I think, okay, that explains it now. It's much more festive than you first thought. And she's sending me emails. I can't come to OSU to do this little talk for you. We're going to win this thing. I'm sorry, I got to cancel. I said, don't worry about it. It's like, you got a good project, but let's just keep the doors open. Maybe you can come. So I'm looking at this thing and I think, wow, that's great. It's really good. So I'm looking and I'm going fast. And then she sends this rendering of all the wonderful people that are really good. Can't wait to get in to PS1 for a party. And I'm thinking, that's going to persuade the jury for sure. Where's the door? It's just, there's something I can't quite put my finger about these people. So I keep going. And then there's the happy people in the place. It leaks on purpose, by the way. As you will see, there's one thing called environmental property. So there's the dolmens. See these little things? This is fantastic. See those corners right there? That's what's supposed to make it look more dolmen-like. That's these instructions to poke nails in order to round off the corners, sort of. And there's those happy people, finally got in. And it occurs to me that they're missing their heads, which is sort of the theme of the thing. And I'm thinking, what is it about what is it about this map? And I realized, when I first met Anna, she told me she was from Paris. And a little bit later, I say, you're not from Paris. He said, no, I'm from Russia. And then I'm thinking, she said, I'm Jewish. I'm from Russia, and we had to move here to escape the pogroms. Or pogroms, she pronounced it correctly. I think, okay, you know. This is all the dolmens in the world. And I think, oh my God, there's only one dolmen in all of near Russia. And it turns out it's right there. Does anybody know where that is? That's right in the Ukraine, where the Russians have taken over the Ukraine, recaptured it so they could get their port to the Baltic. So this entire operation is her fantasy. I think she's a spy or something. This entire thing has got to do with her obsession of getting, I mean, this is her backstory. I'll let her present it to you, but I can tell you there's something going on here, and you guys need to investigate her. Anyway, no heads. Thank you very much.